All right, so let's get started. So this is the final group session. I'm actually going to have you schedule a very short one-on-one session with me after this, just so that I can answer any remaining questions that you might have, and to ensure that you're able to use the Zoom platform to schedule meetings, because you'll eventually be doing that with your learners. And then also that you'll be able to share your screen as well, because you'll also be doing that with your learners. And then during that meeting, I'll talk about some resources that will be available for you, whether they be print resources like physical books, or some digital resources that you can use as well. So here is our agenda for today. The first thing that we're gonna do a little quiz. So you're gonna do it in groups. So it'll kind of be like a Quizzo format, just to test what you are able to recall from our Google Classroom modules. And if you can't remember, you can always go back and check. Because the Google Classroom will be available for you from now on. So you can always go back and reference materials. The second thing, this is the main activity for today, is the lesson planning activity, which you'll be doing in groups. So you'll work together to design a lesson plan for a scenario student. I have some details for you for the student, but you can kind of make up your own as you guys go along and design the lesson plan. And then finally, I'll talk about the final, one-on-one meeting that we'll have together. And then that's it. Hopefully we can finish a little bit earlier today, so that you guys can all get a chance to go outside. All right, so our objectives for you is that you'll be able to practice screen sharing with Zoom while you're working in groups. You have 2 chances to do that. The second is to create a lesson plan following the WIPIA framework. This is one type of framework. It's recommended by the federal level. There are other frameworks that are available, so this is just one that's highly recommended. And then the final thing is just to get some details about the final task that you will have for scheduling a meeting with me. All right. So just to talk about that final task, you will schedule a dummy ongoing Zoom meeting. Right. Zoom has a feature where you can set it, and then it will schedule reoccurring meetings. That way you don't have to constantly text your student and be like, oh, we're meeting tomorrow. Here's a reminder. If you do it through Zoom, it will remind them automatically. That way, you won't forget, your student won't forget. And there are some videos in our Google Classroom that I uploaded to help you do that. So there are 2 videos, all right? And then you can take a look at them later. And then the second thing is you're gonna send me the invitation, all right? This is for you to practice inviting someone to a meeting so that you'll be ready once you get your learner, all right? Okay, so, and again, I will upload this into our Google Classroom, and I'll send an email reminder with this assignment. All right, so for our group activity, there is going to be a Quizzo. All right, so I'm gonna post this link into the group chat. You'll work together in teams to try to complete it as quickly as possible. The first team to complete all of the questions and get them all right is the winning team. So let me put you into groups right now. And this is kind of how you can think about, what you're targeting when you're teaching or tutoring your learners. Which of the 4 skills will you be targeting? True or false, someone with no English speaking skills probably can't read English either. And that is actually false. There are lots of people who actually can read a language and also write a language. And usually those 2 things go hand in hand, being able to read and write. And then there is being able to speak and listen. And those 2 skills go together as well. So you can be able to speak and listen, but not necessarily be able to read and write, and vice versa. But you can also be able, to do all 4 at the same time. So this is false. Number 3, stress is not great for language learning. At least like not stress that kind of is too mentally taxing and makes you lose confidence. Some learners have told me that, just a little bit of push is good, but not overwhelming stress, especially not in the classroom. And then the person who popularized the idea of comprehensible input is Stephen Krashen. I don't know if you remember, he does a demo where he's teaching, I believe he's teaching German, and he's talking about a vampire. And then he's demonstrating the vocabulary for parts of the face of a vampire. And that's, to me, I find it super fascinating, because I'm learning German and I'm like, he's only speaking German, but I'm able to learn German while he's doing it. So it's really cool. In terms of the scaffolding techniques, there's so many. This is, one graph that shows the examples. This is in our Google Classroom. A lot of you guys mentioned, using gestures or images, speaking slowly, using vocabulary. So there are a ton of different scaffolding techniques to use. Number 6, the more corrective feedback that you give a learner, the faster they will learn. That's also false. We know that corrective feedback needs to be targeted. Right? You can't correct everything at once. Otherwise, you can meet with them like a few times and they would be able to learn everything, right? So it definitely needs to be very strict and targeted. And then this also kind of goes back to stress. If you give them, like, if you ask them to turn in a writing assignment and the whole thing is filled with corrections, that's super stressful. And then it's hard to know where to start, if you're a learner. So it's best to keep it very targeted. And then LEA stands for the language experience approach. This is mentioned in that video where the tutor shows the learner how to write a story about their family by using pictures, photos that he has. And then finally, WPIA is an acronym that stands for Warm-up, Introduction, Presentation, Practice, Evaluation, and Application. And this is a recommended structure for planning a lesson. And the evaluation is, this can happen anywhere, throughout the lesson. So it can actually be a part of the practice. It can be a part of the application. But it's here so that, when you're planning a lesson, you explicitly think about, oh, when will I evaluate my learner? Because that's super important to be able to know if they're completing the objectives. All right. So we're going to move on to our next group activity. And this time you can have the same person screen share, or you can have somebody else in your group screen share. Again, if you're not familiar with screen sharing, that's totally fine. This is an opportunity to give you a chance to practice screen sharing. So you can, if you're not super comfortable yet, you can have the first person, walk you through it. But if you want to be like, okay, I want to try this on my own first before doing it, then you can have the same person continue screen sharing throughout this group activity as well. So just to go over the activity, this is in our Google Classroom. So I'll go to the link and show you after this. But while you're working together, make sure you have some roles for each other. So one person is going to be screen sharing, and then whoever's screen sharing will also be typing as well. One person can be the timer, just to make sure that you guys are on task and will be able to submit the lesson plan on time. And then if you weren't the screen sharer or the timer, you can be the speaker when we share out the lesson plans later. All right, so you'll have about 20 minutes to discuss in groups first about what you want to do for your lesson plan. And then roughly, 12:55, I would suggest that you start writing out the lesson plan because it does take some time to actually write it out. So you have about 30 minutes to do that. And then if you finish before the time is over, you can go on break. We'll have a break for everybody. So we'll reconvene at 1:30. All right. So I'm going to put this link into the group chat. It links to, all right. It links to the final lesson plan assignment. Okay. And what you're going to do is you're going to click on whichever group you have. All right, so Amy's group, you're going to be group 1. All right. Janet's group, you're going to be group 2. All right, and Rosemary's group, you're going to be group 3. All right. Amy's group, you guys will have scenario student 1 when you're thinking about creating the lesson plan. Again, these are just, a quick snippet of who this learner is. You can decide other details, such as whether or not you're meeting them for the first time or if you already have been meeting them. So whatever isn't there and you think is important, you guys can fill in yourself. All right. So again, this is Amy's group, student 1. Janet's group, you're going to have student number 2. Okay. And again, Janet, you guys are in group 2. And then Rosemary, you're also going to have student number 2. All right. So I'll put the link into the chat. Any questions before I send you guys off into your rooms?
Are we going now?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, yes. So for the lesson objectives, we put the student will be able to tell a story about a typical day as a health aide using some medical terms. Based on the story, she should be able to recognize, read, and write medical terms. As for materials, technology, and resources needed, we will use picture, pic, one, the teacher will use pictures of some of the objects used in her typical day as a the student's typical day as a health aid. Also, flashcards to review vocabulary and Google Docs for the learner to practice writing. All right. And okay. So first is the warm up and review. For 5 to 10 minutes engaging in conversation about simple things to set the tone for the lesson and get the learner comfortable. We will introduce ourselves and get an understanding of how she speaks English now and what, if any, reading or writing she does in English. And then for the next 5 minutes is the introduction, discussing the purpose of the lesson with the learner. We will be discussing a typical day as a health aid and writing it as a story. The learner will practice reading and writing the story. And that what we tell the student about in the introduction. So then comes for the next 15 minutes is the presentation, in which we ask the student about this teacher asks the student to tell about her typical day and her job duties, as well as what medical equipment she may use. Ask her to describe her patient, age, gender, and health condition, and how she uses the equipment. Also, the student is asked to describe situations where she needs to read or write something, like reading a medicine bottle or writing health notes. And then over the next 45 minutes is practice time, in which the teacher writes down the story as the student tells it and reads the story to the student. And we ask the student to identify, the teacher asks the student to identify medical terms in the story. The teacher can also use flashcards with pictures of some of the equipment, such as a thermometer, and etc., to review with the student. The learner should practice reading and writing some of the words. And then for evaluation, the student can read the story to the teacher. And then finally, as application for application, the teacher asks the student to read pieces of the story and answer questions. The teacher can also hold up cards with some of the words and phrases and ask the student to help the teacher put them together in the correct order. And then for homework, the student can practice reading the story on flashcards. The student can identify new words that they use at work and that she would like to be able to read or write for the next session. So, okay, I hope I did all right, but yeah, that's basically the plan we came up with.
Thank you so much for sharing. I think you guys did a wonderful job with like the timing. I like how much time you put in the practice with 45 minutes because you know that's kind of the most important part usually. I also like that in the application stage, you guys don't have the learner doing something like completely new. I think a lot of times a lot of people struggle with that. So I really like that you're just having them reorder the story. What were you guys considering for some of the questions in the application part? Where you say, ask her to read pieces of the story and answer questions. What kind of questions did you have in mind?
I think we were, thinking about like kind of expanding on almost the story in a way. At least that's how I was thinking of it, in terms of asking a little bit more detailed. If it's talking about, she had said, I take the patient's temperature, we can engage a little bit more and expand out the use of that idea, like, you have to be able to understand the thermometer and write down the temperature, and words like temperature, like that kind of additional words.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. All right, wonderful. Any thoughts or questions from other participants? All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing your lesson plan with us. Let's have group 2 share their lesson plan. And then group 2 and 3 had a different student scenario.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
And can you see our lesson plan?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So we did have a different scenario. As Robert mentioned, we have an intermediate to advanced learner whose primary or one of their languages is Chinese. And they have a parent-teacher conference coming up for their son who is in 5th grade. And this particular teacher is their geography, or his geography teacher. So it said that the parent wanted to kind of talk specifically about some of the problems he was having with assignments, and also ask about his behavior in class. Based on that, we are gonna set up some objectives so that the student is able to, we're gonna review with them some standard vocabulary and create flashcards for their conference to practice before their conference. And then we're also gonna review really specific questions about challenges with the geography homework, and also specific questions about how to ask about his behavior in class. And then we also have to practice sort of how to give answers and to ask other related questions, because it's more of like a conversation than just like one back and forth. So for technology and resources, we figured that it would be helpful to have Bao's textbook or any homework or notebook work that he has done for geography class. And also, because of the parent-teacher conference, we assumed that there might be a report card or assignments with grades that were generating the mom's questions. And then lastly, just to have their laptop so we could have our session. Can you guys see this now? If I move down to the directions, okay. So for warm up and review, we took the approach that this is a student that we've met a few times, and also because they're an intermediate advanced learner, that they have some facility with having conversations. So we just discussed that what we talked about last session, we briefly review what we talked about last session about framing some questions that we had worked on and using grammar. And then we kind of said, oh, remember how we role played calling a doctor. So then for the introduction, we said, well, today we're going to do something similar. We're going to use another role play activity to prepare for your parent-teacher conference. And specifically, we're going to identify vocabulary that might come up, use some flashcards, identify questions for about Bao's homework, and identify questions about his behavior. And then we'll, once we do that, we'll role play a conference. So we then have an extensive discussion about Bao's homework and behavior to understand specifically what mom, Martha, is worried about, and to talk about his teacher in school in general, because that helps us to understand what types of questions she might need to be able to answer or to ask. And then specifically to his assignments, what her concerns were, and any other thoughts and concerns. Maybe she thinks this teacher is not approachable, or maybe she's worried about his behavior in different ways, or knows something that's happening at home that she wants to share. But we don't know that sort of from the sample, but we'll get those general answers by asking her. Also, one suggestion Monica had was if we could find a sample clip of a parent-teacher conference that might be helpful for the student to see sort of what that dynamic looks like, because it can be intimidating for sure. And then for practice, like the main piece, we're going to write down keywords and questions while Martha discusses Bao's schoolwork and his behavior. And then the tutor will play the teacher for a role play of questions and answers that might occur during the conference. We'll also practice words that the student wants to learn with flashcards. So as we role play, things might come up that the student is not as familiar with. So we'll do some flashcards, and then we'll work on any pronunciation, phonics, sequencing, or like understanding word opposites that they might need for the actual parent-teacher conference. And then after we spend that major part of the session, we'll want to make sure that we kind of evaluate how successful we were with the student. So we'll review the flashcards for sight recognition, and then discuss anything that came up during the role play that they felt went particularly well, or anything that was especially challenging, or any just general questions the parent, Martha has about sort of what a parent-teacher conference means, or anything like that, like any generic question. And then we can write like sort of a short sample story and have the student do a gap fill activity by writing, standard questions that of the type that we already practiced. And lastly, we would have them practice their flashcards at home, and maybe practice a role play with a spouse or a friend who has a student in school as well, someone who might be more familiar with kind of standard American parent-teacher dynamics for a conference. So there you have it.
Great lesson. I like all the authentic materials that you guys are pulling in here with Bao's textbooks and a video clip of a real parent-teacher conference. This looks like a really fun class. I would definitely want to participate in your class.
Cool. All right.
Any questions or comments from the other participants?
Okay, should I stop sharing then?
Sure.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and then last but not least, we'll have group number 3.
I'm gonna screen share and Rosemary's gonna present, if that's okay. Is that visible?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, we had the same scenario as the last group, and as far as objectives, discuss geography homework with her son's teacher, discuss her son's behavior in class with her son's teacher. And resources, we would have blank flashcards and paper for the language experience story. Okay, and during the warm-up, which would be 15 minutes, we would talk to the student about her past experiences with the parent-teacher conferences, and talk to her about her son and what he is learning in geography. And then for the introduction, today we're going to role play, talking to a teacher at a parent-teacher conference and asking about your son's geography homework and his behavior in class. And then for 20 minutes for the presentation, we're going to assume that the student has already been to a parent-teacher conference. So we're going to have the student generate a language experience story about the parent-teacher conference she previously attended. And then for practice, we assume that the student has previously discussed her son's geography homework with his teacher. We're going to have the student read her story that she wrote in the presentation, either with or without assistance. If she can read it on her own, then we would let her just read it. If not, we would help. We would make basic flashcards with words from the story, 1 word per card on the front and the definition of the word on the back, either in English or Chinese or both, and introduce new words that a teacher might say, depending on what words do or do not come up in the story, and make basic flashcards with those words. Then for the evaluation, for 20 minutes, we would have the student generate her own sentences using the new words and review those words, any words the student had difficulty with. And for the application, we would role play a parent-teacher conference with the student using the language experience story and flashcards as a reference. And then for homework, practice using the new words with her spouse or friends.
Great. It seems like you guys took a similar approach to group 2 there with the role playing. I like how much vocabulary is emphasized in this lesson here. Yeah, thank you for sharing your lesson.
You're welcome.
I would, all your classes seem really enjoyable. I would definitely want to participate in all your classes. I like how you guys all kind of, even though it's the same learner, you guys kind of took a slightly different spin to the lesson. But there was a lot of emphasis on vocabulary, lots of role playing, making it feel like a real life environment. So that's really, really cool. And also really important because it's authentic to the student that you have. So that's wonderful. I'm glad to see that you guys have been able to internalize all of the concepts from the Google Classroom modules and create this wonderful lesson plan out of it. So kudos to everyone for doing so.
Thank you.
Right. So I'm going to quickly go over our final task for you. It's not a Google Classroom assignment. This is going to be you scheduling a Zoom meeting with me. The tricky part about this is that I want you to do a reoccurring meeting, all right? And you'll be able to see instructions for how to do so in our Google Classroom. It's at the very top. I just uploaded it. So you'll see 2 videos. If you've never created an account before, I suggest that you start with this video. And then also halfway through this video, it talks about how to set up meetings as well. And then this video talks about how to screen share and audio share. So if you haven't done that before, you can also check that out. And then I have a calendar that I uploaded that is subject to change. So definitely try to put in your name as quickly as you can. We'll only meet for about 30 minutes. You know, if you're super comfortable with Zoom, you know, it could even be shorter. You're gonna just quickly screen share while we're meeting so that I know that you're comfortable doing it. And then if you have any questions that you still have, feel free to bring it up during our one-on-one. And then during this meeting, I'll also show you all the various resources that we have that you can tap into so that you don't have to start from scratch when you're meeting with your learner. So yeah, so once you see a time that you like, just put your name in it, and then I will hold that for you. I'll put that in my calendar, and then I'll, you know, then we can meet during that time. But once you put your name in it, you still have to send me that meeting request through Zoom. So and I can just, I'll actually quickly show everyone where that can be done. So when you schedule a meeting, you'll see an option for recurring meeting. So make sure you click on that. And then you can do weekly. And that's how you schedule a recurring meeting. And then you can have a set end date if you want to. You can make it, you know, for a couple months from now. And then that's how you set a recurring meeting. And then once you save it, you have to make sure that you add it to your Google Calendar. Or if you have Outlook, you can do it that way as well. You can actually go through your own Outlook calendar, set up a recurring meeting, and copy and paste that link. And I don't want to go too deep into it because I want to respect everyone's time today. But like I said, the videos, you know, will be helpful while you're trying to do this. And so, yeah, that's it for our session today. Thank you so much. If you have questions, immediate questions, feel free to stick around, and, you know, I'll stick around and try to answer any questions right now. If not, you are free to leave and have a wonderful day. Hope you get to enjoy the sun today. I know I'm going to go for a bike ride after this, so hope you get to do something fun as well.